It's simpler without you around. I'm severing our relationship. I never thought I'd hear such words on Thanksgiving night. I could feel the apple pecan crumble pie's warmth slowly slipping from my hands as I stood outside the front door in the chilly air. Claire Robinson, my mother, was in front of me. She had on pearl earrings and a satin shirt in a rich crimson. The juxtaposition of her impeccable beauty and her scathing remarks left my mind reeling. "Oh, what did you just say?" I just managed to ask. I was surprised at how raspy my voice was. "Don't make me say it again. It's Thanksgiving. Everyone wants to have fun." "The tone darkens when you arrive," she said, as though I were a challenging client. I said, "But I baked the pie again this year, just like always," before my voice faltered. Before I knew it, my sister Haley was standing behind her, observing us with a wine glass in her hand. "I warned you that this year, Mom, you ought to have declined. Chloe is unsure of her role," Haley remarked. "She just makes things awkward for everyone." "My place?" I automatically repeated what she had said, and Haley shrugged. "You provide background support both at work and at home. I assume you are aware of it. Not you are the star. Therefore, it's really a pain to show up and ruin the mood." With a loud crash, the world in front of me fell apart. I had spent every spare moment this past week going over pie recipes, buying supplies, and battling the oven till the small hours of the morning. It wasn't out of duty or a desire for acceptance. All I wanted was to get somewhat more intimate with the family. I finally answered, "I understand," and was taken aback by how composed I sounded. "I'll just leave this here." I carefully let go of the pie box and set it next to a terracotta pot beside the door. "Eat it if you feel like it." My mother's yelling voice said, "We don't want it," from behind. However, it no longer evoked any feelings in me. If anything, her blade-like tone conveyed desperation. I moved away from the entryway and started to walk without looking back. My father, Jason, came out of the home at that very time. I hoped our gazes would lock, but he remained still, expressionless, and turned away without saying anything, vanishing behind the door. In this house, I was truly invisible. I felt the weight of my body abruptly as I slid into the seat of the automobile again. The driving wheel seemed a little unpleasant to hold, and my fingertips were chilly. A flashing message notice appeared on my phone screen when I opened it. "Are you still there? I'd like some pie. Tonight, come over to my apartment." That message's kindness suddenly brought tears to my eyes. Since she wasn't feeling well, my grandma had declined to go to Thanksgiving this year. However, I was aware of the reality. She was simply worn out after the argument with my mom. She must have known what type of role I played in that household. She decided to keep her distance, not interfere, and not push herself to be there for that reason. But a location-sharing software had allowed us to connect. She must have realized something was amiss, because I had been standing in front of the home for a long time without moving. I thought I could hear her warm voice through the screen. She is the one person that allows me to just be who I am. There was no one who knew my skills better at home or at the firm. At the Robinson house's entryway, I took another peek in the rearview mirror. I didn't own the dazzling lights, the wreath hanging on the white pillars, or the laughing leaking from within. I didn't have to turn around anymore. I whispered to myself as I put the car in reverse and started to drive away. "Thank you, Mom, for waking me up." Those were not angry or sarcastic remarks. There was nothing left but a silent determination. I gazed blankly at the city lights flickering outside the glass as I drove. Everything seemed to be glowing with joy on Thanksgiving night. There were wreaths hanging in the yards, lights streaming from the windows, and the aroma of turkey filling the air. Today, I didn't feel any connection to any of it. Without you, things are simpler. I'm severing our relationship. I could still hear my mother's comments at the front door, but they were monotonous. Oddly enough, though, no tears fell. If anything, I had the impression that the thick chains that had restrained me for so long had finally snapped loudly. I had long ago started to question the definition of family. After living as a member of the Robinson family, I realize now. I began attending the firm for the first time while I was a college student. The modest back office behind Mitchell Systems, the firm my mother operated, was where I would go after my evening classes wearing my university blazer. That was my first job, but it was just a windowless, dirty, and badly air-conditioned conference room. I need this client data cleaned up today. Take caution. Complaints result from duplicates, my mother stated. I turned to the computer in silence after nodding in agreement with her cool directions. I opened enormous spreadsheets and carefully went over each row without any guidance. I quickly learned how to use the Excel calculations. Finding discrepancies in the data and accurately fixing them gave me a tiny sense of success. However, I seldom remember ever receiving gratitude or recognition for my efforts. I would just be informed, it's all yours, and given the next work right away without any compensation. I quickly formed the practice of identifying and resolving irregularities before anybody inquired. Error indications, minute changes in numbers, odd timestamps. I believe I had inadvertently honed my intuition behind the scenes. I was in charge of monthly payroll by my sophomore year. By my junior year, I was also helping to define the procedures for system tests. I was surprised to discover that I knew more about the internal system structure and financial flow than anyone else. However, that was because my mother purposefully gave me those responsibilities. Leave the glitz of sales to Haley. You've got the numbers, my mother said in a tone that was typically serious and dry. She didn't give me any praise or criticism. She merely said what the company needed to know. Nevertheless, I secretly hoped that her robotic voice had the smallest glimmer of expectancy. My responsibilities remained the same even after I graduated from college and formally joined the organization. As I got more involved in the basic functions, financial analysis, cloud server security, vendor contract audits, and collaboration with our accountant, Melissa, they actually grew more profound. The everyday operations, processes, and money would have repeatedly stopped if I hadn't been involved. I kept the field together by being the one who knew the task best, from modifying contract wording to setting up security settings to modifying figures before closing the books. However, my mother always favored my sister first and never recognized that contribution. She participated in important decisions, talked naturally in meetings, and was presented as the potential successor. In the meantime, I was invisible and never had a chance to speak, not even at meetings. A quiet, practical figure that only did as he was told. I was handled as though my non-existence had been presumed from the start. People who are best suited to work behind the scenes shouldn't stand out too much. One of my mother's favorite sayings was that, since I had no reason to reject it, I never did. I truly enjoyed spending time with my mother. I wanted to think it was my place because of this. Despite the lack of recognition or appreciation, I persuaded myself that doing my job well had purpose. My grandma, Emily, was the only one who ever claimed to have seen me in person. You are the foundation of this business, Chloe. It has nothing to do with glitz. Without its spine, no building can stand. My grandmother continued to visit the department where I worked, even after she retired from the firm, silently keeping watch over me as I worked hard with my hands. Her coffee always had the same scent and was of the same type. That little moment of comfort through the paper cup's lid warmed my heart in ways words could never describe. My grandmother's comments conveyed confidence rather than authority or command. Her eyes recognized me for who I was, not for my performance or my stats. As long as you're here, everything will be fine. I felt like I had reaffirmed my position every time she smiled and stated that. For someone like me, overburdened with responsibilities and without the time or space to speak up, her presence was like a lighthouse, a steady, serene light that never went out, even during stormy times. Someone reached out to me without saying a word before I totally collapsed. And that individual viewed me as a mature lady rather than a useful family member. The only thing that saved me was that fact. After working for the firm for more than 10 years, I eventually stopped and noticed something. Nobody had ever inquired about my desires. Can you handle this, Chloe? I'm sorry, but this is only understood by you. After all, it's only behind-the-scenes work, right? As though painting over my shape, those many phrases accumulated on top of one another until they vanished. That's why my mother said tonight, it's easier without you. I'm ending our relationship were an admission that I didn't exist. However, they were also a proclamation of freedom to begin at the beginning. Without the pressure of the company, my mother's eyes, or anybody else's expectations, I discovered that I could listen to my own voice. And now I'm going to the one person who really notices me, my grandmother's house. I still haven't let go of things. Deep down, I still feel anguish and fury, but I'm not turning around now. There has never been a more serene and silent Thanksgiving night at my grandmother's house. Only a pot of tea my grandma had boiled and a tiny additional pie I had brought were set out in the middle of the table. There were no elaborate dishes or pompous toasts. Grandma was sitting next to me, clutching an old knitting needle in front of the blazing fireplace. She simply remained at my side in silence, without asking me anything or hurrying me. And that quiet seemed reassuring. She began talking as soon as I took the first mouthful of pie. "This is your preferred taste." I always knew in that house, even if no one else did. I felt like I could finally take a deep breath after hearing those words. When I woke up the next morning, I experienced a type of energy that had not been there in a long time coming from deep inside my body. When was the last time I wanted to accomplish something for myself instead of someone else? However, such tranquility was short-lived. My mother sent me an email a few days after I got back from seeing my grandma. It was titled "For New Project." A $2.8 million bank loan agreement and a business strategy for the development of AI solutions were included in the accompanying PDF. The contract already had my name on it as a co-signer. I called my mother, feeling both shocked and uneasy, and she answered as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "You are the only one, Chloe. Haley's credit score prevented this loan from being approved, and I am no longer able to take chances with my personal guarantee. You have a flawless credit history and an MBA. The bank stated that if it was in your name, they would authorize it." She spoke in a cool tone, as though my name on the paper didn't bother her in the least. I was not informed about this. It is not permissible to use my name without my permission. I didn't utilize it. "I take it you haven't signed anything yet?" "I just gave the contract in advance. Furthermore, it's only normal for you to assume responsibility and participate since you work for this organization." Natural struck me with a deep pang. How much have I already given up for accountability and involvement? The start of this project is too abrupt. Not even a proper explanation has been provided to me. That can wait. "To complete the transaction, we now require your credit." Her speech had a hint of desperation. I felt a silent rage at the way she used my name as collateral, even though I knew she was running out of time. I hung up and slumped back in my chair, immobile for a moment. But I was unable to act on my feelings. I had to maintain my composure. I had to verify the facts first. I opened the company's standard cloud-based administration tools with that in mind. I was immediately struck by an odd feeling of limited access. I had previously had unrestricted access to certain areas of the server and project-related files, but now they were closed. I spoke with the department administrator, who informed me that a system permissions review had taken place, but I had not been notified or given an explanation. I also stopped getting invitations to the normal management meetings a few days later. Only that one appointment had been removed from the calendar I had normally used when I looked at the schedule just in case. The mistrust increased. Nevertheless, within the parameters of my access, I continued to examine transaction records and spending information. Then I noticed something in one ledger entry that caused me to question my own vision. There were delinquent records on the loan that showed an inappropriate spending of more than $50,000. The actual material was scarcely authentic, although a number of transactions had been handled under marketing charges. Additionally, the $2.8 million loan's payment history included past due entries, and the notes section ambiguously stated the cause of the delays. I looked into the suppliers involved, but the transaction history was brief and the identities were unknown. I created backups and gathered all pertinent papers just in case. I casually contacted Melissa, our accountant, that afternoon and asked her to do her best to investigate the origins of the expenditures. She responded to me 2 days later with even more startling details. The registered address of that vendor, a shell corporation with no actual business operations, coincided with one of Haley's own investment properties. Stated differently, they had transferred corporate monies into their own associated business by means of fictitious consultation payments. My entire body became numb. It wasn't rage. It seemed more like a silent chill creeping up my spine. In that financial transaction, my name had been utilized as the official signatory without my consent. How might this kind of event occur? Why hadn't I seen it earlier? Even more alarming information surfaced when I dug deeper into the contract details. My signature was scanned and added to the contracts. The date fell within the same week that I had been occupied with Thanksgiving preparations. The contract had never been explained to me. I initially wanted to think it was an error of some kind, but the written name Chloe Mitchell was prominently displayed on the signature line, along with a picture of my signature. In addition, the ledger included documents pertaining to the $2.8 million loan process, including past due comments and discussion specifics I had never participated in. All of this had been done in my name. Someone else had been using my signature to submit false applications while I was working up late sorting the company books. Behind my back, my future and my credit had been pledged as collateral. I was being used as a cold, quantifiable asset for convenience, not with appreciation or respect. When my mother said, "You're the only one," there was no semblance of expectancy or faith in her words. She only used me as a handy credit instrument to shield the company's and the family's reputation and brand while evading personal accountability. What was lost were my future choices, the integrity I had accumulated over the years, and most importantly, my meager chance of having faith in my family. I phoned my grandma without thinking. She seemed to grasp everything as soon as she heard my voice. Prior to my mother taking over, Grandma was the president and creator of Mitchell Systems. She had witnessed both the good and bad aspects of management, including betrayals and conflicts. Perhaps this explains why she talked calmly and without pausing to gasp, sensing the catastrophe that was concealed beneath the tremor in my voice. Remain composed, Chloe. Only those who have seen it can take action in this scenario, and you possess that power. Do not panic. If you must move, go slowly and purposefully. First, get your name off of any loan agreements. That should be your first focus. Only someone who has established a business and weathered irreversible disasters could have the solid weight and steadfast conviction in her voice. I went to my desk and started gathering the evidence while her words pressed softly against my back. I started by saving backups on an external device and moving the papers that demonstrated the fake signature into a different folder. I then looked for any trends in all of the documents that had been signed in my name throughout the previous 12 months. I could see that someone had attempted to copy my style since several contracts were obviously not formatted, worded, phrased, or laid up the way I usually do. No one had ever trusted me. All I had been was used. I then got in touch with Aubrey, a lawyer, and started drafting a formal notification that my name would not be used in any future loan agreements, that my signature had been used without my permission, and that the contract forms had fraudulent aspects. Quickly, gently, but fully, Aubrey answered. She also made arrangements for the appropriate papers to be turned over to an independent auditor and started to limit access to the company's IT systems. I had the proof I needed and the reputation I had earned in my hands. Finally, your life is about to begin, my grandma murmured with a little grin as I told her about it. Perhaps she was correct. No, she was entirely correct. I had always labored in the background, pursuing metrics to demonstrate my value and providing steadfast devotion. For the first time, however, I was starting to construct a future for myself. My signature was no longer required on the $2.8 million loan. Finally, I was able to identify myself as the main character rather than a supporting character. In my breast, my grandmother's words blazed like a light, not a spark, but a calm, constant fire that filled the house. I do it that way. And the individuals who had unjustly utilized my name would realize the true meaning of my silent power. A few days later, armed with all the prepared documentation, I went to our partner bank's corporate division. I carefully described the problem to Brandon, the lead loan officer, who was at the meeting. I produced a number of contracts that I had signed without authorization, thorough records of more than $50,000 in unapproved spending, and information that connected a dubious vendor to potential theft. Brandon was unsure at first, but as he studied the documents, his face became serious and he gave a cautious nod. This is a significant issue. It has an impact on the loan's reputation. We'll start an internal inquiry right away. Quietly, I nodded. This was not retaliation. It was just an act to rectify the facts. I sent them a written statement and copies of the necessary paperwork, and I told them that our legal counsel will contact them to discuss the next steps, which included filing a lawsuit. I exhaled deeply after completing everything and walked out of the building. I went directly to the company's headquarters after that. For the first time in a long time, I entered the company's conference room that afternoon, the same day I had turned in my proof to the bank. My sister and mother were already waiting inside the room. When my mother noticed me, she paused going over some paperwork. "What are you thinking, Chloe? Did you actually notify the bank of this?" Haley was the first to speak, her tone stiff and obviously annoyed. "Why wouldn't I? I presented all of the falsified signatures and false claims pertaining to the $2.8 million loan and the ambiguous financial transfers as proof. I silently set the copies on the table after taking them out of my backpack. These are documents of the agreements you signed in my name. The vendor agreement pertaining to the $50,000 in inappropriate spending is also included. My signature appears on each of them, although I never agreed." Something flared in my mother's eyes, but she didn't move. "What are you making a fuss over something so minor?" "That minor thing can constitute financial fraud," said a soft but unmistakably serious voice from the back of the room. Everyone was momentarily frozen in place. My grandma was there at the entrance as I turned around. With a cane in her hand and a neatly dressed attire, she stood tall. Her age was evident in the way she moved, but her very presence altered the mood of the space. She entered the meeting room slowly but steadily while using her cane. The surprising thing was I hadn't even contacted her. Yet, she had come, as if she already knew everything I was going through. "Grandma, I told you not to come. You didn't have to. The moment I heard you finally stood up for yourself, I couldn't possibly stay silent." She smiled warmly and took the seat directly across from my mother. "Claire, do you remember what I told you? Never underestimate Chloe." My mother spoke without changing her expression. "This is business, Mother. Please don't interfere just because of family ties. This isn't about sentiment. It's about responsibility as a business leader. You used your own daughter as a legal tool, and you put the company's credibility at risk." Haley slammed her hand on the table in frustration. "Mom didn't do it. I arranged everything. And Chloe's been involved in loan matters plenty of times. We just got ahead of the process a little this time." "Got ahead?" I slowly looked at Haley. "You forged my signature, created false contracts, caused loan delays, and even made unauthorized expenditures of $50,000. And you call that a little? Don't say it like it's just business as usual." Just as Haley was at a loss for words, my mother interjected. "Chloe, I understand what you're trying to say, but everything was done to protect the company. What this company needed right now was someone who could deliver results immediately. Your credit was just a means to that end. So that makes it okay. That's how business works. You still don't understand that." No, I understand it perfectly." I looked straight at my mother. "I'm not a tool for this company. I'm not a shadow. I'm not a convenient guarantor. From now on, I will use my name by my own will." Silence fell over the room. After a moment, my grandmother spoke. "Chloe, you've said everything that needed to be said, haven't you?" I nodded. "The rest will proceed through legal channels. You'll be receiving a formal notice from my attorney. I intend to have my name removed from all loan agreements and clarify accountability for the forged signatures. Of course, this will also be reported to the board." "You don't tell me. Are you recording this conversation?" Haley turned pale as she raised her voice. "No, there's no need. I already have all the evidence I need," I said and placed the documents back into my bag. As I stood up, my grandmother also rose slowly to her feet. She looked only at my mother one last time. "Claire, you may have thought Chloe was a useful child, but you never saw her as a trustworthy adult. That was your biggest mistake." My mother said nothing in return. She only pressed her lips into a faint line and watched us leave. The sound of the conference room door closing was strangely quiet. Out in the hallway, Grandma gently took my hand. "You did well." "Yeah, thank you." For the first time, I felt I could say those words from the bottom of my heart. From now on, what kind of place would I build? What kind of life would I live? I didn't know yet, but what I did know for certain was that I would no longer live in someone else's shadow. I would live under my own name. And now, I have just taken the first step. 3 months later, I stood looking out over the city from the window of my new office in the suburbs of San Francisco. It was a small place I had chosen myself, something I never could have imagined back when I was buried in the ledgers of Mitchell Systems. The business I had just launched was a consulting firm aimed at supporting female entrepreneurs. It's still small in terms of name and achievements, but every face I met, every email I exchanged, none of it was under anyone else's shadow. It was all under my name. It was all work I had started by my own will. My grandma was there for me at every stage of the launch. Don't be scared of the dangers. Something has already been accumulated by you. She was right when she mentioned that several old clients who had trusted me personally got in touch with me, and the initial contracts went more easily than I had anticipated. Despite staying up late to complete proposals by myself, I experienced a subtle sense of accomplishment. I finally accepted responsibility for and took pleasure in the job I had previously done in silence for the benefit of the business. Meanwhile, Mitchell Systems remained in disarray. In addition to reviewing the loan arrangements with the bank, the board started to investigate the internal malfeasance that had occurred. As the external audit went on, the reality about the contracts I had signed, where the $50,000 in expenditures had gone, and the anomalies related to the loan started to surface. My mother's and my sister's positions started to fall apart. Officially, my mother resigned from executive leadership, citing health concerns. However, there were already voices within the organization calling for her to be held responsible for the abuse of power, the falsification of internal records, the unapproved use of signatures, and the fraudulent loan applications. Every conduct was now considered a significant infraction that might be classified as criminal fraud or forgery of private papers, and jail time was now a possibility. Haley, my sister, continued to hold the position of director of sales, although a number of significant clients had already asked for their contracts to be reviewed. She had lost her former air of confidence and was still avoiding official pronouncements about the audits and media attention. They now have a duty that extends much beyond internal disciplinary measures or a decline in trust. It was not my actions, but rather their own decisions, that made criminal charges a very real possibility. Once, my grandma forwarded a brief note from my mother to me, saying, "I think I'm finally beginning to understand just how much you've carried all this time. It has taken some time. I hope that one day I will be able to sincerely say thank you to you. Even if that wasn't an apology, it was sufficient. Even if we don't communicate again and nothing changes, I will continue living my life." I put my cup in both hands and shut my laptop. I don't work to prove anything to anyone anymore. I labor for myself in silence, but with confidence, not like a spark, but like a flame that never goes out.